As the Foundation begins to fall to Nacrian forces, we pick back up with Gaal Dornick on Synax and witness the events that led from her fall from faith to waking up 35 years later on an abandoned ship. Welcome to The Road Goes Ever On and On. Today, Sterling and I will be talking about the 5th episode of the hit sci-fi series Foundation, so spoilers ahead. And if you put your faith in us by hitting that like and subscribe button and turning on that bell for notifications, we will not abandon you like the Seers abandoned Gaal. And with that, let's talk about this 5th episode and actually how much, with a little bit more context, how heartbreaking Gaal leaving Synax was. You know, we see, I thought it was interesting in the first episode when we see Gaal leaving Synax and her dad hugged her, and I thought it was kind of a strange hug. And then to see that Gaal's father was, an acolyte to the Seer Church, her mom was an acolyte to the Seer Church, they had this aspiration for Gaal, and her father basically wished she was dead rather than go into the machine world.
I think that might have been a moment of passion, of whether it was fear or something along those lines where he lashed out, because seeing the hug both when we first saw it in the first episode and then again in this episode, it did seem legitimate. It did seem like a real hug. But it does completely paint a different picture. And so her mom knew a little bit of what was going on. Her dad didn't. And that was kind of the first time he saw it. And he lashed out, which paints an interesting kind of mirror or bookend, where Gaal has been in space for almost 35 years. I think with some level of awareness. She's just been alone this whole time. And you could argue that she's probably always been alone, because she has always been a little bit different from everyone else. And so even though she has tried to fit in, it's clear that it didn't quite work. So I thought that was kind of an interesting, bookend of seeing her in space and then realizing she's kind of always been like that.
In the beginning of the episode, it talks about the black hole and how she was afraid of not escaping the black hole. And I thought that was, great imagery for this entire episode. The black hole could be, escaping Synax, I can't get off this planet that is inevitably doomed to die. The black hole could be leaving Synax to go to Trantor, and now she's stuck in this event that she wasn't planning to be in. She was going to go educate Harry's students about how she solved the equation. And now she's stuck in this ship and she can't get away from the ship. She's literally stuck. That's the black hole.
I was actually thinking about that same kind of thing a little bit differently, but the black hole both ends up being real, because I think that's what the dark star is. It's a star where light can't escape, so it's basically a black hole. So she literally does end up encountering one, but then it's also a metaphor for these other things. And I think the scary part of it, which is kind of the interesting thing of a metaphorical black hole, is the event horizon, a point of no return. So if you think about events in your life, if she'd stayed on Synax any longer, she wouldn't have been able to escape. She wouldn't have left with her life. So there are all of these kind of black holes in her life, of these points of no return, where she's doing that delicate balance of trying to be in control of her life and trying to make sure that she doesn't get swallowed up by something that she'll never be able to leave. It's a beautiful metaphor. I thought that was a really brilliant way to kind of show that.
I agree. Speaking of beautiful, also another thing that I thought Synax is a beautiful planet. Her dad talks about
Seriously.
Trantor being this machine world, and Synax feels like this planet that's like part of the universe, like in depthly, because you see like the rings at night, and it had so many gorgeous shots on Sidnax.
It does, and you see these hints of the life below the sea, and those are kind of beautiful and compelling. You see these hints of like the life below the surface, and that's really interesting. And I obviously it would be nice to be able to see that. It would also be more expensive in special effects, but I kind of like the way that they've done it, where we've just seen glimpses from the surface. Like rather than doing this kind of thing where we dive below the surface so we can get an in-depth look of something that we don't need to see, we're seeing these whispers of it, which I think to some extent kind of alludes to like a bigger world. Because we have to fill in the gaps of what we don't see because we just see like the outline, and then that also gets our mind racing to fill in the gaps of what else we don't know. So I actually like this idea of like just showing a little bit.
Tried and true saying, less is more. And I think that with that less, it makes it more. Like, we've seen critters on other planets like Terminus. There's those little small critters, but it's always kind of from a far angle. Like, we're not zoomed up on them. We're just getting these very quick glimpses. Makes the world feel real, but also not going too in depth into the animals, which is great.
Right. Not at all trying to bash it, but like I feel like Avatar does the exact opposite, and it's almost like fetishizing every single shot, where every shot is a chance to cram in as much as possible to the point where I don't feel like your imagination really gets a chance to fill in any gaps, because there visually there aren't any gaps. It's just constant information versus like whispers of things that you have to do.
It's a full fleshed out world, full language. All the animals has its all ecology. It's all fleshed
right.
out. Nothing to the imagination.
And I think that there are other kind of like interesting details that they do here on Synax. As far as like the university being flooded really speaks to like the rising tides, and kind of reminds me of like Venice, where they battle these problems as sea levels have been rising. Now obviously that's like with the tide, so there are plenty of times when it doesn't happen, but there are times when the water is higher than like pedestrian level, and shops, like the bottoms of them are getting flooded. And so I thought that was kind of an interesting shot that instantly kind of tells you a little bit about the troubles they're facing.
And especially Synax, we mentioned that this was maybe a metaphor, like the Foundation was like a metaphor for climate change. I feel like Synax is definitely a, huge metaphor for climate change. Right. Scientists are saying the waters are rising, there's going to be hurricanes, flood, algae are dying, and they're like, no, it's just a test by the seer. It's just this the sleeper. He's testing us. It's all
right.
part of God's plan. I mean, seer's plan.
Right. It's interesting, kind of going back to metaphors that you kind of mentioned, because I do feel like they do this a lot, which I don't think you see that a ton in movies. I think you read about that in books. I think it's a lot easier to do like a metaphor in a book. Now, obviously, it's voiceover is kind of how they're getting away with it, but like the ghost, I think, has been very much a metaphor. Because the ghost ended up being real. Maybe it's not an actual like ghost, but there was something real that people thought was a ghost, but it also points towards like the ghosts in our past, and you see how their past is haunting them, and how you're always filled with the decisions of the people before you. This show does a great job with these like metaphors and themes. Themes are another one. Like, I think this episode we've got cycles, ebbs and flows, and death and rebirth. The instructor in the university talks about these. And I think that there's things that we see play out in there, and there are things we also deal with in real life. So I love that storytelling.
Yeah, speaking of metaphors, I was actually thinking about how is the Sky Bridge a metaphor for like the Twin Towers falling on September 11th? And the reason I ask this is because there's the scene where we have the Imperial guards on the ship, and they were, basically like, you lost people on the Sky Bridge. That makes it personal for you. That makes it personal for all of us. And that, like, to me, like, really hit home of, like, that was, like, a terrorist act that, like, probably set a whole bunch of people that are in the Imperium on this warpath of hating Anacreans. And why the Anacreans have, had such a hard time with trading and, you know, getting any technology.
And it creates this like cycle of hate, where as you pointed out, the people on the Imperial jump ship are like the guy is basically saying like this is personal. We've all lost somebody in this. So let's go ahead and handle this situation. But also the Anacreans are basically saying the same thing because they got ruthlessly bombed. The it's not like whatever resistance or whatever it was targeted. And so because of that, it seems like the Anacreans are enjoying killing the people of Terminus who are, you know, I think would normally be considered kind of guilt free, but it's like no, you're part of the Empire, and if it wasn't for Hari Seldon's prediction, those crazy people wouldn't have done this. So it's technically your. So it's like just this like cycle of.
Well, so she says. So I also feel like there's a bit of misinformation too, because she says that because of that attack, because of the Skybridge and Harry's predictions, it made Empire go forceful on the Anacrean bombing, which we found out that like he was going to choose that no matter what. Doesn't matter what the predictions are, and maybe had he listened to the predictions and was sparing to the Anacreans, maybe could have stopped the fall of the Empire.
Right. I'm kind of loving this aspect. Going back to, what you mentioned, kind of with like the look of Synax, I, for the most part, am enjoying the cinematography.
Oh yes.
We when we were in that, I mean, so we already talked about Synax is gorgeous. I thought it was interesting when they first go into like the university and they're using like the Dutch angles, and if you don't know what that is, it's when the camera's at an angle, and like those Dutch angles, added with like the dim lighting like really creates this kind of, you know, scary, like, or just it just makes you feel off, like something is wrong, not necessarily scary. So I love the kind of use of that.
I agree that the Dutch angle is great because I feel like they can. Too many people overuse the Dutch angle when it doesn't make
Yes,
sense and it's just like a weird slanted scene. But in this, it made sense. They're not overusing it. It was great.
it's too easy to overuse it or misuse it. Not even
Right.
overuse it, but just use it in a way that like doesn't quite make sense. It's so sad to see the instructor. Like he clearly knows the family.
The instructor? Which instructor? Oh, Sorn. Instructor Sorn.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. In the so sad to see him in there and knowing that he knows he's doing the right thing and he knows that he's probably gonna have an unfortunate end because of it. And so like I feel like that really is appropriate, that it's like it does a good job of making it feel not quite right.
But I do love that they gave his character. Like, okay, so his character says the greatest thing like the most noble thing humans can do is pass down information. And, he was basically in that library to get information, to learn, to like, get the numbers, to study. And what did he do though? he passed on information to Gail Dornick, who will hopefully, that was like the catalyst to get her to leave the Seer Church. So he helped pass knowledge to her.
And that quote that she remembered was what made her realize that she needed to work through her pain of losing Raish and stay alive. Like it looked like she was about to harm herself, and I feel like that was the thing that made her realize, like, I need to live, I need to work through this pain. So yes, I love that scene. It was both sad and significant, you know? So it was good.
And it did
And then
explained a lot about Gail and her family, and how her family became these devout religious people, and Gail went down that path as well, where they seemed like they had pretty similar views when he was coming to dinner and enjoying his time with the Dornick family. And
right,
gave us some context about her family.
which makes it seem that makes it seem like it happened within a generation, you know? So it's like, what could have happened in that amount of time? You know, like, is it the power of the seers, you know, like people that either legitimately or seem to legitimately predict the future that could turn people, like, what thing could make people go from this to that in such a short period of time? Like, this isn't something that, like, happened over many generations, and it's like it continued to get a little bit worse, you know, each generation. So I'm curious if we get more of that, or I'm also cool with, like, leave it to imagination, you know?
And
so
I like
it
that.
doesn't quite seem like a plot hole. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I feel like they do a great job with the cinematography. So there were plenty of these techniques and things that I really enjoyed, but for me, it's not all perfect. And in particular, I feel like the thing that they are not excelling at, which I totally get, like, this is like a specialty, the fights. Like, I felt like they were relying on shaky cam, you know, rather than, like, great choreography or a ton of time practicing the moves, so that they don't have to do shaky cam, and so they don't have to switch out to, like, have, you know, a stunt double, and they don't have to do, like, those cuts constantly in order to hide what's going. Like, I feel like some of the techniques that they are doing are techniques that you do to hide things.
I agree. I thought that they were so lackluster.
They were. Yeah. And I know that not everybody can do, like, the one shot hallway scene of, like, Daredevil, you know, or
Right.
like the John Wick type stuff. I get it. And it's expensive as all hell to do the John Wick style and have your actors go through expensive rehearsals, you know, because, like, that talent costs a lot.
Oh
And just,
yeah.
like, rehearse, 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 rehearse. When so many other shows and movies are like, let's put in experts, and this shot, it's the back of the head, so we can just, like, flip that person in. You know, like, I get it.
It does seem that more of the budget is spent on fleshing out the world of Foundation. It, you know, like the backgrounds, you look at how the ship came in, and it has, like, the plumes of smoke, like in the intro.
Right.
You know, like, there's a lot of, like, computer generated work, and it seems like a lot of the budget went towards that versus the fight
Right.
scenes, and I'm okay with that. You know, like, I would rather feel in a lived-in world.
Right. Like, this isn't. This is a movie that happened to have some fights in it. It is not a fight movie.
Right.
You know, it's just I think that's possibly made worse after like how amazing the fights in the John Wick movies have been.
Yeah.
That's kind of shown us what we can do. And having seen that, it's kind of hard not to then judge other things. But I get it. It's not a fight movie. It's not a fight TV show.
There was
I'm okay with it.
one important reason for the fight. And you know what that is, right? To break the sundial.
Break this.
They were fighting and the sundial breaks in the fight.
I mean, I think the water dial, I think, would have it like the sundial broke into like three pieces that I think you could easily like super glue back together, which I think further speaks towards the fact that it's a good choice in a not advanced society versus like the water dial gone. It just would have like shattered.
I do have a theory, kind of related to the sundial. What if this is the prequel to Earth as we know it? Like at the end, you know, we're gonna get to a point where it starts off Earth, and you know that's why they needed the sundial and the primitive tools, and we don't know what's gonna happen, and you know maybe our first group of people lost all their technology when they landed, started agriculture. Maybe, I don't know, but it was a fun thought I was toying around with.
It's an interesting theory. It reminds me a little too much of rabbit hole I've recently gone down with. There's people who dig up skeletons and
Archaeologists.
like archaeologists. Thank you.
Oh.
So there's a YouTube archaeologist that I've gone down this rabbit hole, and when he's not doing amazing archaeology, he is debunking people that have wild theories about archaeology, including shows on Netflix that should not be getting money. I think Ancient Civilizations, maybe I don't remember exactly what it's called, but the big show on Netflix centers around this idea of like clearly these civilizations couldn't have done this stuff on their own, so it points towards like alien, maybe it's ancient aliens, I don't, anyway it points towards like some society we don't know about, that's like global in scale, that did all of this stuff. And the thing that is always really obnoxious about that is that it takes away the amazing things that each of these cultures did and makes them seem like dumb apes that couldn't have done, like, there's no way these dum-dums could have built a fucking pyramid on their own, you know?
Right. Are you talking about the YouTuber that does all the stuff? Like, he does all the, like, hard work that these ancient civilizations would do? And...
No, he,
Oh.
no, he just, it's a Mini-Minute Man.
Okay.
And he teaches people about archaeology.
There is a YouTuber, I can't think of his name now, but he like does all these different moves where he like moves these like 5-ton bricks that like are these big things, and he just like makes some tools to like shimmy them and roll them and get under them and pivot them, and he does all this crazy thing. I forget what the YouTube channel is called, but all this crazy work of doing these insane things that you'd be like, there's no way a human could do this with just some rudimentary tools, and he does.
Right. And that's the whole thing, is like, rather than spending any amount of time of figuring out like how could they have done this, a bunch of people go straight to conspiracy theories of like it's not physically possible, so let's just go straight to whatever crazy thing. And so he spends some time debunking those and just making those people look like absolute idiots. So anyway, so like that's a long way of saying that I'm kind of hopeful that that's not where this is going, because while I do like that idea, it reminds me of this other thing where it like takes the credit away from these peoples and make it seem like, well, there's no way these dumb dumbs could have done this without the teachings of Hari Seldon. Like that's basically exactly what these people say, is like something like what you're describing.
Right.
You know?
It,
So
it could be a whole cycle thing. Like
I
it
guess,
could be this is the start of the empire. Like we started here,
I,
we form an empire, we fall, we do it again.
but so I guess like the reason that it bugs me is because like it
Cheapens
hits
everything.
home on like, well, no, not just it hits home on something that has been bugging me a lot, which is like conspiracies and a distrust of science, which talk about
Circle
cycles
back.
loops us right back to where we are of like this whole thing of like the people on Synax like distrusting science, and they are all going to die to the whatever floods that Gale is talking about. Like
Well, they're probably all
there's
dead
something,
now. 35 years later. They're probably all dead.
probably like
Yeah.
there's something going like, and so it just it like it hits a very personal note of the world that we're living in right now, of like rather than people wanting to look into the natural world, or like believing scientists of just like going these crazy directions and like closing their ears and being like la la la, I don't. And the worst part is like when it's fucking policymakers. The person that was just elected speaker
I don't want to talk about it.
doesn't believe in climate change.
Yep,
like
yep.
like the when the people who make the decisions that affect all of the rest of us have their head in the sand.
It's very unfortunate.
While there's like evidence that should be irrefutable, like let's cycle back to this Venice.
Right.
Like
The water is rising. We gotta get out of here. We should call Mr. Rabbit. He'll come in and he'll help us. He'll fix it all. Full circle.
No, you know what the issue there is? We're gonna, because of where we are, we're gonna get the American Mr. Rabbit, and nobody wants that Jessica Hyde.
No, we do not. I wouldn't mind John Cusack as Mr. Rabbit. John Cusack, fix the world, please. Oh, he's not even Mr. Rabbit. He's not even Mr. Rabbit.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. One more crazy rabbit hole before I forget to go down.
Mr. Rabbit Hole.
One more Mr. Rabbit hole to go down before I forget.
Okay.
I think that there's going to be an antagonist force that we have not met yet in Foundation. And I think we got another clue to them in this episode. First clue, go back to, I think it was the second episode where they go into the biohacking place, right? They were putting the bombs in there. We saw another bio thing with her eye. Her eyeball looked real. Farah's eyeball looked real the entire time, and it was an EMP explosive. I think that there's going to be some organization that is getting these prosthetic parts that is pushing for the downfall of the Empire.
Right. And it, like, is that a force that, are they just like weapons peddlers. I don't remember what they're called.
Arms dealers.
Who arms dealers? You know, where it's like they're just they're just looking to build their own kind of like wealth empire, and they don't care how that affects. Or are they? Is this a group that has an agenda, like you said, where it's like their goal is to bring down the empire? I do actually want to kind of walk back something that I had said, which is I don't. I'd originally said that I felt like Harry possibly made the attacks happen. I don't. I don't know. I can't quite tell on that. Like I'm curious if his predictive model was just that good.
I don't think he necessarily set them on that path, but I do think someone set them on that path.
And his so Farah said it, and I think if Harry didn't set them on that path, I think Farah was partially right, and it's exactly what Empire was scared about, is that it doesn't matter whether or not Harry's predictions are true. People believe it. Salvor said, we're innocent. I don't remember exactly what she said, but basically, like,
we
why
didn't do
are you
anything.
doing this to us? We didn't do anything. And she says, it's because of Harry's predictions
that made Empire...
That made a group attack Empire.
No, I thought she said that her predictions... I thought she said in that episode, his predictions said Empire made him act that way, made him attack Anacreon.
Roll back the tape.
You have the tape? Perfect.
No, I'll have to look at it. But the impression I got was like, by the way, I'm sorry, I just became a 13-year-old. The impression I got,
puberty hits us at all different times.
The impression I got was, I thought she said something along the lines of like, and I'm paraphrasing and also saying it in much more verbose, which is what I'm good at, is speaking too much. I thought she said something like, it was because people believed in Harry's predictions that the attack happened, which caused Empire to then kill the Anacreons. Which I could totally see that, where it's like Harry knew that in bringing his accusations in such a public manner that would both hasten like the start of the end, but also by getting Empire's help to help him build foundation would also give him the tools to like soften the blow. So like I think he possibly knew that he was both part of the problem, that like his words were inciting this violence, but that also he had the solution to help. So like it was going to happen regardless. He was possibly speeding that part up, but then also softening the blow.
I do still think they were set up, Anacreons and the Thespins. Because, like, first off, the Anacreons and Thespins don't seem very friendly with each other. You know, there's kind of like the disputes with the meteors. They don't seem like they're on the best terms. And this seemed like a coordinated attack between Thespin and Anacreon people. And I think it was to make them be guilty because they were on the planet. There was the scuffle.
This is what arms dealers get boners about.
That's what I'm saying.
You get a fight going, and then everybody needs weapons, and it's like, sure, yeah, like I've got weapons.
I wonder if Foundation's gonna attack the military-industrial complex as well. You know, if you have endless wars, make that money. It's inevitable.
But then there's the fight scenes.
I I was gonna say something
was all-
about the fight scenes, but I felt like
Please.
well, no, I mean, I was gonna like not say anything about it this episode because I felt like I was
Yeah.
giving, Foundation a hard time for like the jumping, which has been rectified in my opinion. Now it seems like we're pretty much on a straight line path of events we're witnessing. But I was like, I'm not gonna say anything about the fight scenes, but on the second watch, I was watching it. They're really bad, and it's not just like one fight scene was bad. All of the fight scenes are bad.
All of them.
They're not good anywhere. Like watching Hugo fight the Anacreans coming in was not good. Watching the Warden fight Farah, terrible. That was awful.
Yeah. When the forces from the outside are charging, it felt like a bunch of stormtroopers because I just like all I see are just shots and so many like there first of all I think that they said something like at least about 50 people at each of those things. So there's there's got to be at least like 200 of them. And with all of these shots being fired, I saw one person fall down. It's like I know they're running.
But still, even when they're running, like you were saying, there's like a group of them, and it looks like they're all shooting straight forward, and it like they're behind them. They're like in rows, and they're all shooting straight forward.
My wife said the same thing. Yes, so she was saying like they're running and like some people are in front. Like how are they not shooting each other?
It wasn't like shooting between people. They're just all shooting straight. Yeah, that they need to work on their fight scenes a little bit, and maybe in season 2 they get a bit better. But we'll see.
If a comedy like Community can get their fight scenes right, then there's no reason why this can't. And I realized they didn't have the same cast, and it actually turns out that they had the Russo brothers working on it. They were cutting their teeth on it, so it's not quite like
they could have got the Russo brothers to do Foundation, right? They're not doing it. They're done with Marvel now. They could have done a Foundation. Maybe they did do Foundation. No, they didn't. I do think we got a couple theories confirmed in this episode. I think Salvor is confirmed her Gail's daughter. And in the part where she's trying to rescue her mom, she says, there's that special cord between us. I gotta tell you, I've never felt it. And then the mom looks at her and says, you were telling me just to get down, right? That's all you were saying, right? And she just ignores her and leaves. So I think that that's a confirmation that she is her daughter.
I did not pick up on that first part and how her mom could have misinterpreted that.
And her mom, she says, you were telling me to get down. That's what you were saying. And I have subtitles on, and it was a question mark. She's curious. Like, that's all you were saying, right?
That's all you were saying. Not that first part, right? Oh, I didn't even think about it. Because that first part seemed like Salvor, I don't think she necessarily meant that. Maybe there is, like, a grain of truth there, but I think that like that part she said to make it seem like your hostage is worthless to me, so just do whatever you're gonna do, and then that allowed her to say the next part, which is like a coded message, but her mom heard that first part and is like, does she mean that?
Well, I think she does mean it, actually. Because if you think about Salvor and how she's been treated in this group, like, it does seem like her mom, even though she's, like, listening to her about the vault and how its perimeter is expanding, she does seem like before that, they've always kind of, like, butted heads about, she's kind of the weird one. She doesn't fit. And, like, they even talk when they're giving her Seldon's map. And she's like, I'm different, not special, you know, like, and it seems like
Right.
she does feel like a disconnect from her mom in that sense.
Oh, that's sad.
I
That's
know.
that's a good catch. I don't think I really caught that, so I definitely like that.
Okay, and I think there is a theory confirmed about a ghost. I think we're gonna get
Okay.
a ghost of Harry Seldon, right? What are what are your thoughts on that final scene in the ship?
I can't. Okay, so I can't quite tell because it seemed like it was glitching, and I don't know. Like I kind of feel like his, even if we don't necessarily get his body, that maybe his mind has been uploaded via whatever was behind his ear. So, because we do know that when she enters the ship, it says something about, the race incoming protocol or something like that. Like it's very clear that it was supposed to be Raish. It was Raish's blade is what like opened the door, and then we now see Harry Seldon's form on this ship, and we're heading towards Harry Seldon's home planet. So this does seem like it is the two of them were working together, and I think that she wasn't supposed to walk in, and Raish realized that she would be implicated, and so the best thing he could do was to have her go because it was a pod for one set up with these coordinates, so there's not time to really.
I mean, I do think that is, even more heartbreaking. It does seem that like this was part of the plan. Like even Raish still seem like to stand by his convictions that killing Harry was part of the plan, and like even talking to what's his name, Lawrence, saying like
Lewis.
Lewis, saying like might not make sense to you now, but it makes sense. And then he looks at Gail like he knew she would be watching, and he's like, "You can
Yeah.
solve this." Here's my question: can't predict one person's actions to figure out where things are going, right? You can't follow one person. You can only follow groups of people. Then how would he know that Raish's killing Harry would be something that would, like, how could he track that? Like, how could Raish's impact on killing Harry manifest?
So because that wasn't a prediction. Instead, it was a variable in an experiment. So it's like, if Harry lives, how would a population deal with that? Okay, now run the simulation again, but if Harry dies, how would the population move forward? And now run the simulation again with Harry dying in a kind of a martyr's way, like too soon, and in a way that people continue to like remember him. Now what would a large group do? So they didn't predict Harry's death.
Well, I think they did.
That's like, I don't think they predicted it. I think they ran a number of different tests on that model of like, how would people respond to that? Like, how would people respond to these three inputs? Think of it that way. Like, how would the population respond to input A, Harry lives forever, or not forever, but like long time, And then, and so it wasn't predicting what was going to, like, they took that action so that they could see the reaction predicted by that large model.
I guess that makes sense, but also kind of, thinking about it where they say that, like, the actions of one individual, like, so if Harry is that one individual, like, if his action of him dying versus his action of him living, I do feel like that muddies the waters a little bit, but I'll accept the variable input model. That makes more sense. Math is pure. What can I say?
So there was one sciencey thing, speaking of like math and science, that I liked, but I wish that they would have expounded on. I don't know how they would have done it, so it didn't seem kind of like nerdy. But when Gail is trying to figure out where she is and where she's going, there's a bunch of different things that she has to calculate. And one of the tools that she used was Doppler shift to figure out like directionality. Like, are myself and this thing moving away from each other, or are we moving towards each other? And this is something that was used to prove that the universe was expanding, because as waves move away from you, they get longer. And as waves move towards you, they get shorter. So, for instance, when if a light source is moving towards us, it'll move towards the blue end of the spectrum, because that's shorter waves. And as it moves away, it moves into like the red spectrum. So we can see that all of the like lights out there are red shifting. So they're moving away from us. So that's how we can tell that the universe is expanding. And they use that trick, and it was kind of cool. And if all of that sounds really weird to you and kind of hard to understand, a very simple real life, like real world example we've all experienced is when a siren goes by. Those waves are shortened as it comes close to us, and so we hear it really high. And the moment that siren starts going away from us, it instantly shifts to sounding lower. And that's that Doppler effect. And so like it was kind of cool seeing her use that to like be able to figure out like, am I moving away or closer? There was a bunch of other kind of sciencey things.
Used geometry to figure out her position. She was using proofs and cones to figure out where she was.
But like it was all super science jargon, to the point where like they didn't. I mean, I realized there wasn't another character to talk to. Like normally you have, like the dum-dum next to them, they can be like, well, what are you doing? And it's like, well, I'm triangulating. If you know that you have three, like. So I get that. And they're also not talking down to the audience. They're, so it's like, if you get it, it'll enrich you. If not, like, we're not spending too much time on it, so you're not going to feel like we're being too sciencey. So it was an interesting balance, but I did feel like that was a cool principle, and I wish, like, somehow.
Only to be... I thought it was great. A whole montage of her just calculating big brain stuff, and then she's just like, I know where we are. She's like, no, you don't. That's a view screen. Like, I just... that computer! Right. She's like, yeah, I'm hiding where you're going. It's so messed up.
Yeah.
But I do think, going back to the Harry's ghost, I do think it is going to be a ghost of him, and I think that that's him, like, coming back to life, and, like, that was his last memory, was him dying. And I think that that's his conscious coming back into existence, and he's, like, experiencing, like, the death, and, like, we'll probably have to, like, come to terms with that, and then he'll be part of the ship, maybe.
I mean, I would argue that's not, like, literally his ghost, because, like, I do think it is, like, we saw it glitch, it does seem like a computer thing, but it also, once again, kind of going to this show and how it, like, has metaphors and has themes of, in the last episode, we had a question about the soul, and whether or not all of these Cleons can actually have a soul, because they aren't actually individuals. After Harry has passed, and is it really his consciousness, or is this just like a computer simulation? Like, is that... I wonder if that leads to a question of, like, can that actually be Harry does it have a soul, or is it just what makes a person? It's kind of interesting, and I don't feel like this show throws these concepts in your face.
Oh no.
I feel like it just like, which like most shows that deal with things like this would want to seem very smart, and like would want to have a discussion, like two of the characters have a discussion of like about it. And I feel like they're bringing up some of these things, and then, hey, you want to think about it on your own, feel free to. You want to move on and see some fun sciencey things, we got like, or like sci-fi, like weird worlds and fighty, like we got that, you know.
Yeah, and with we also see with Demerzel, does she have a soul? You know, we see emotions from her.
Right.
Like there's all these different like aspects of the soul. Like, does AI have a soul? Does a clone have a soul? Does the consciousness of a dead man have a soul? Like these are compelling things. I do feel like the casket has something to do with why Harry's in that ship.
100%.
It's a casket he designed himself.
As soon as I heard that line, I turned to Dawn and I was like,
That's
remember that line, because that's important.
right. He built this casket all by himself. He had a whole death plan, like just in case.
Right.
Seems a little. I think that that's gonna be his consciousness. Whether, you know, on that little thing, it did show that knife several times with lights on it, and I'm not sure if that was that thing. It didn't look like the thing, but I thought that might have been a connection with that knife.
So I wondered about the lights, because like, so I didn't think that was related to the consciousness, but like what I kind of wondered was, it looked like something was going wrong. Although that might kind of tell you about because right after we saw the glitch of like those lights kind of like coming on and off, she then saw the glitch of Harry. Because there was the pool of blood and then it disappeared, and then there was another pool of blood, it disappeared, and then there was Harry. Maybe this just takes a lot of energy. My original thought, and now that we kind of talked this through, I kind of think that we're like, this is related to the glitching in the system, and I'm wondering if it's something as simple as like, it just takes a lot of energy, and it's like the system's taking a moment to like boot up. But originally when I saw those, it looked to me like the lights where the knife was, it looked like there's a problem. Like maybe the knife was dropped and now there's like an issue with it and it's not connecting properly. And it's like, could this cause a problem? Because like without that, like the doors didn't open, and like that seemed to like boot up the whole system. So my initial question was, is this pointing towards a future problem that's going to happen, where it's like that knife isn't quite connecting with something, or something along those lines? It seemed like an issue. But that the lights glitching kind of seemed like Harry glitching, so I think there's a relation.
I think it's transferring his consciousness, maybe, but I still feel like that casket has got something to do with it. I do think that,
or maybe he's just trying to avoid like rising funeral costs. Like that's a very big, expensive industry, and that's one of the most expensive things. So it's like, why would he not like DIY his own casket? Like, how is
looked like a pretty nice casket for DIY. Just throwing that out there. I don't know if this has any relevance, but Cleon. I know this was an episode without Cleon, which I was not a big fan of, because I'm loving Cleon. He's great. One quick aside, I do like that it does seem like the Empire is not like a terrible empire. It's not like the Emperor and Darth Vader going around conquering, the galaxy. It does seem like, Lewis is like beholden to the Empire. Like, everybody wants the Empire to continue. Everybody wants the Empire to succeed. Like, and it's just Cleon's hubris that has kind of set them down this path a little bit. But where I was getting at is he's Cleon the 13th, and I don't know if he's just unlucky number 13, and that's why everything's going bad.
I think Hari Seldon wanted civilization to continue, but he certainly was advocating for the end of Cleon's reign, which kind of spells an end for this version of the Empire, even if another emperor lives on.
Because the Empire's been going for 12,000 years. Like, we have 12,000 EA era of Empire or something, and 400 years of Cleon. So it does seem like the Empire in general is beloved. Like, and it just seems like Lewis loves the Empire. Like, he, when they're talking about when the Anacreon's coming in and, destroying everything, he does seem like he just wants the Empire to survive, essentially. Like, that's what the Foundation is aiming for.
Right. Okay. That actually reminded me that I wanted to go back to something that I said last episode or the episode before, and I'd remembered doing the math on this, and then I completely forgot what math I did. And the moment that you said a word, I felt like everything around me crumble.
Math
and
is
then
pure.
when I looked at and then when I looked at my notes, I was like, no, I think I'm actually right on this. I think the Cleons live for 100 years. And I know that you said there have been 12 Cleons, so obviously it hasn't been 1200 years, it's been 400 years. Here was the math. They don't reign their entire lifetime. They only reign for 1/3 of their lifetime. So if you divide 12 by 400, you get exactly 33.33 repeat, exactly 1/3 of 100. Exactly.
That makes actually more sense. And
So on which that's that's a countdown to your 100th birthday, Yeah,
but after 100 years, who needs it, It's like, I've lived a good run. Spent 100 years on this place. I'm ready to go do the next shit.
Which is amazing because, I think our current day Cleon, current,
13.
I feel like he is struggling with pain and connecting, whereas the dusk that just passed into darkness, I feel like he did feel like he might have had some regrets and some things that weren't left done. Like, he hesitated when Demerzel was, walking him, and he said something like, something's not right. He wasn't ready to and it didn't even necessarily seem like, I don't want to go. I do think there was some of that sadness, but it did seem like he questioned whether or not he had done everything he could, and if maybe the Empire was in the state he wanted it to be.
And I feel like, I think he would be the first Cleon that was leaving since the Sky Bridge broke. Right?
Right. Yeah.
He was the first one, and I think that Sky Bridge messed the Cleons up. That was the legacy that was brought forth by the very first Cleon, and now he's leaving. I feel like I would be the same way. If I saw my empire where the Sky Bridge that my predecessor before me built has fallen to the ground, there's the Sinkers are coming up rebelling, there's the Luminists that are starting to rebel, there's the communication buoy on Terminus not responding. I don't know if
Right.
I would feel like, oh, hey, you know what? I hope you guys got this. I'm out of here. Good luck. See you later. I would be
Right.
hesitant to go too.
Yeah.
But with that, I think our journey has come to the end. Thank you for joining us. Next week we will be tackling Foundation episode 6. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks.